Hello everyone, I'm Julian Morris inviting you to another segment of the Channel 5 News. The World Bank has approved over 270 million EC dollars for climate resilient infrastructure in Dominica. That disclosure was made by the Honorable Prime Minister in an address to the nation on Monday night. The Prime Minister also made mention of grant funding to the tune of $10,000 for farmers and small business people.
The third component of our recovery and rebuilding plan is the rebuilding of our future communities in a climate resilient way. This includes the repair and rebuilding of schools, clinics, hospitals, and homes, sometimes whole communities. We're not going to patch things up quickly and cheaply and hope another hurricane does not hit us. As we rebuild, we'll also invest in new climate resilient systems to ensure that we have food security, energy security, and ICT security. We are working intensely with the World Bank on specific parts of this recovery and rebuilding agenda. The currently proposed package from the World Bank includes an EC $270 million tranche of funding, alongside a further EC $83 million tranche, specifically for disaster resilient infrastructure. I believe the disaster resilient tranche will end up closer to EC $150 million after a reassessment of needs is completed within the next month.
If you woke up this morning and turned on your tap and found there was no water flowing, well, there's a reason for that. DOASCO has been working feverishly to restore good quality water to its customers in parts of Roseau and environs. That's as a result of some heavy siltation, heavy silt, lots of silt in the Springfield intake as a result of heavy rain on the 16th and 17th of October. So currently they're using heavy equipment to try and remove the silt and ensure that you once again have good quality water that they can once more distribute to their faithful customers.
Hurricane Maria affected many right here in Dominica, and a section of the country that was affected severely by the hurricane was the private sector. Now, to help us discuss this effect is the Secretary Treasurer for the Waterfront and Allied Workers Union, Mr. Curtis Augustus. What would you say was the most devastating effect that it had on the private sector?
Well, just before I respond to your specific question, I want to express my sympathy to those Dominicans that passed during the passage of Maria. But I also want to encourage the remaining workers that they should be resilient and they should try to the best to do what they can to bring back the country to normalcy. The passage of Hurricane Maria did in fact have a devastating impact on Dominica, and more so from the standpoint of organized labor, the impact it has on the working population. One of the concerns is that people are going to be laid off as a result. There is a responsibility on the part of the leadership of the trade union movement to ensure that the laws that govern layoff redundancies are in fact complied with. We have had situations where we have been advised and told that a number of employers are not complying with that requirement. From the Waterfront and Allied Workers Union standpoint, we have interacted with two such organizations, the Fortune Hotel, the premier hotel in Dominica, and Greens Wholesale, one of the companies that we represented. We were told in the case of Greens Wholesale that people were going to be laid off for a period of 6 months. So I immediately was able to get in contact with the management of Grains Wholesale to let them know that layoff, according to the law, speaks to the question of 6 weeks. At any case, it was covered in our collective labor agreement, Article 19. So we indicated to them there that they should in fact read that article again. And in that article, it states specifically that seniority of service shall be the determining factor in all matters relating to layoff and recall after layoff. So the management was able to reorganize its plan in that regard, and to have people be issued with letters of layoff for 6 weeks, during which time they will make a determination as to the number of people that they will continue to engage and those that they will require for redundancy. That is the loss of jobs through no fault of the employer or the employee. The other company that we dealt with, and they called us earlier, was the Fort Young Hotel. The management of the Fort Young Hotel, in terms of Miss James and, well, both of them, James, the manager and the human resource manager, we engaged them in discussion, and we were able to agree with them that a core group that they had at the time, who were not able to get to their homes because of the threat of the hurricane, had to stay, and they remained, and they did some mopping up exercises afterwards. But we did engage them afterwards and indicate that for the first 6 weeks that would continue, because we didn't want to disrupt that arrangement, but that in the event that they are going into any further layoff, that the question of seniority would have to be applied. Incidentally, I got a call this morning indicating that the manager, Mr. Gregoire Nassif, would want to have a discussion with the union on Thursday at 9:30 to be updated as to the plans of the hotel in relation to employment levels. The hotel have lost some 34 rooms, and therefore the complement of staff would of necessity have to be reduced. But one of the things I must say though is that we did have the passage of Hurricane Maria, but the looting that followed afterwards, to me, did more damage than anything else. That those persons who, under certain circumstances, would be engaged to work, had the place not been looted in the manner that it was, are now faced with the possibility of losing their jobs. So it would have to be stated that that cannot be the right thing to do, you know, and we must condemn it. It must be condemned. Now, we have heard in other instances where certain management have in fact called their staff and indicated to the staff that they're going to be off for an indefinite period of time. Some of it 6 months, some of it more. Now, I would think that because of the arrangement that they have had with trade unions, that they would engage the leadership of the trade unions in terms of discussing the way forward. Now, there have been some positive things in terms of the address of the Prime Minister last night that I listened to, and more so in terms of feeding the country, where certain of the farmers will be getting grants up to $10,000, and that could help in terms of the replanting and the feeding of the nation over a period of time. We have to get away from this dependence on relief. And if the farmers can in fact get their way and produce, then you have the possibility that as they produce, the reliance on relief would be reduced. And I think that's a good thing.
Now, the union represents a number of people here in Dominica. What would you say is the greatest concern coming from the people that you represent?
Well, the greatest concern, as have been expressed to me by a few, is that there is the concern that after 6 weeks, what are they going to do? How are they going to feed their families? Is there the possibility that they will be engaged where they could gain an income that will help them to sustain their family? So that is a tremendous challenge. And if some of the companies that was not impacted as severely as others, in fact are able to restart, restock, and to provide the service that they were providing before, then the levels of unemployment that would normally exist following a hurricane and the loss of jobs as a result of the companies not being able to put themselves back into operation, that will have the impact on the union membership and the workers. So that is in fact a tremendous challenge, and that is a great concern on the part of a number of the workers. As I say, a few of them have spoken to me directly indicating that is the concern.
In an instance like this, what can the union do to step in possibly and help the situation?
The union could, as we have done, because everything that is done through the process of discussion and dialogue. You would have to know of the plans of the management so that you could make your intervention on the basis of that. I have known of instances where, as opposed to laying off persons, there have been a reduction in terms of the working hours so that it could be spread. I think Parry Bellot had a slogan, "Spread the bread." So if you have the persons not earning the amount they used to, but at the same time guarantee that they are working, it is better than doing nothing. It is better to be receiving half of your salary than none at all. So these are some of the things that you may very well see that are being discussed between the leadership of the trade unions and the management, who would probably otherwise decide that they would just allow people to be off for 6 weeks and sometimes 6 months. But we have to tell them that the law is very clear when it comes to layoff. You could only lay off for a period of 6 weeks, and anything in excess of that, the workers have the option of putting before you a proposal for redundancy. And if that is done, you have one of two possibilities. You must guarantee them employment for a consistent period of 13 weeks. And if the workers then refuse, then you have the situation of not being able to pay the redundancy. But otherwise, you would have to comply with the redundancy based on the formula that we have. Something that is being challenged by us, because I do not believe that if you have worked 30 years, you should lose 24 weeks pay as a result, because of the ceiling that have been placed on redundancies.
Curtis Augustus, we just heard from him on the impact on the private sector. Reporting for Channel 5 News, I am Kenny Williams.